Welcome to today's Energy Central webcast entitled, The Next Big Convergence, Smart Grids and Smart Cities. A few housekeeping notes we'd like to mention. For best results in viewing the presentation, we recommend using a wired high-speed internet connection, as wireless connections can be unpredictable. If you cannot get adequate sound from your computer speakers, you may dial into the audio portion using the telephone number listed in the right-hand panel of your interface under the audio section. Following the presentation, we'll have a brief question and answer period. You may submit your questions at any time using the interface on your screen. I'm now happy to turn the floor over to Kathleen Wolf-Davis of Intelligent Utility, the Editor-in-Chief. Kathleen, welcome to the event. You have the floor.
Thank you, PJ, and welcome to our audience, and good morning for those of you here in Central Time with me, and good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. And once again, we welcome you to today's webinar on the convergence of smart grids and smart cities. As PJ mentioned, I'm Kathleen Wolf-Davis, Editor-in-Chief of Intelligent Utility Magazine, and I will serve as moderator for today's discussion. Next slide, please, PJ. The term smart city, like the term smart grid, is amorphous. It grows, it changes, it engulfs other ideas through a type of almost groupthink osmosis. But within our brains, that fuzzy little smart city concept revolves around more intelligent technology, working together across traditionally disparate industries that touch under a municipal umbrella: power, water, transport, lighting. On this slide, there are a few numbers for you on the smart city side of things, and depending on your source, that smart city market will reach $12 to $25 billion in less than 10 years. The problem is, it's tough to grasp what is truly necessary to make a city smart. Do you simply need a smart metering program? Can you jump on the bandwagon with just that? Do you also need to talk about efficiency? Should there be a green element to this label? Should you be incorporating more social aspects such as policy and better living? China alone has almost 200 smart cities under a development plan, so definitions of what makes each a smart one are a little vague. In the end, though, power is always the first step to any smart city. Let's be honest, no one builds a better bus transport network and then decides from there it can build a smart city. It always begins on the power side of the equation, the one ubiquitous utility need that feeds all the others. Sure, you may want a large EV fleet, but you're going to need the utility's help to charge it. Sure, you may want to set up a test pilot for energy storage on a major street of businesses in your urban center, as Amsterdam has done, but you'll need the utility's help to figure that out and to move it into the grid. Unfortunately, this often means that power companies pick up a lion's share of work when building a smart city, but it also makes them leaders in the field. Wien Energy, which is Vienna's city-owned energy provider, is part of a Smart City Wien and was recently named the #1 smart city in the world by American climate strategists, and that does vary. Rio de Janeiro won it at the World Expo. But back to Vienna, they're working up to 50% renewables by 2030, and part of that program is where the customer becomes a generator through solar power. They call them citizen solar plants, and the first two events saw solar panels sold out within a week. So yes, the company has to manage the project, which includes renting the panels from citizens and buying the panels back after the life cycle ends, but the project is considered a great success by the citizens and the city and the utility alike. But it only goes to prove that the weight of a smart city will be on the utility's shoulders. It will be a lot of responsibility, but it will offer a lot of opportunities as well, as it has in Vienna. Our speakers today are going to talk about those opportunities that will be emerging as the smart grid evolves into smart cities. We're delighted to have Ron Pate with Elster and Larry Owens with SVP. Ron Pate is Vice President of Smart Grid Solutions at Elster. He works closely with the Elster leadership team to ensure alignment of the company's strategic direction and solutions portfolio within industry and technology solution needs and trends. Ron engages with various industry groups and industry-leading companies to collaborate on emerging technologies. Additionally, Ron represents Elster in a number of industry organizations, including the Smart Meter Manufacturers Association of America, in which Ron serves as a board member, and the Smart Cities Council. Ron is an electrical engineering honors graduate of North Carolina State University and has extensive experience with electric utilities, since joining ABB in 1989. His diverse background includes a variety of leadership roles, including engineering development, marketing, product management, and sales for instrument transformers, power transformers, electricity meters, and smart grid systems. Also with us today is Larry Owens, Senior Division Manager of Customer Services and Marketing at Silicon Valley Power. With a degree in environmental studies and 20 years in the electric utility industry, Larry oversees SVP's marketing communications, media relations, key customer services, energy efficiency and renewable energy programs, dark fiber leasing, as well as the development of online information products and services for SVP customers. He's also the executive sponsor and manager of the SVP Meter Connect program for Smart Grid Technologies, chairs the utility's Risk Management Committee, and is involved in regional efforts on climate change, municipal Wi-Fi, and economic development. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on today's webcast. Before we hear from our speakers, let me do just a moment of housekeeping. Our presentations today will be followed by a question and answer period. If you have a question for one of our speakers, you can ask at any time by typing it into the question box on your screen, and we'll gather those up for the end of the program. But again, feel free to ask them while they are fresh in your mind. Ron, Larry, I'm going to turn the floor over to you two.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate the nice introduction there. As we kick off, I'll just share a couple of points about Elster, and then Larry will share a little about SVP, and then we'll launch into the content. So Elster is one of the world leaders in metering and metering systems, and basically serves as the eyes and ears of the grid across the globe. We are operating in over 130 different countries and measuring the flow of gas, electricity, and water. The business unit that I'm in and the unit that is most active in the smart grid is the electricity business unit. And in this business unit, we offer both smart grid solutions and energy management solutions, and both of these are going to be key enablers of the smart cities and smart communities of the future. If you look at how we approach smart cities and smart grids, the bottom line is these solutions for the future are going to require pervasive visibility of the energy infrastructure. You can't optimize what you can't measure, so we are very active in a number of initiatives in this area. Energy management is a core function that we focus on, data collection, collecting all of the pervasive data coming from the smart cities of the future, managing this data, and then enabling an ecosystem of solutions to be built on top of this massive amounts of data that will be coming out of the smart grid of the future. Larry?
Hello, everybody. I'd like to talk about Silicon Valley Power. We're a municipal utility that covers the city of Santa Clara when we're a city at the south tip of the San Francisco Bay. Population of 120. Our customer base is modest as well, but we do serve the who's who of the high-tech industry, and these are customers like Intel, Texas Instruments, NVIDIA, and the who's who of also the data center world. We serve over 30 standalone data centers within our territory. So for a small utility, customer count-wise and population, we do over $300 million in annual revenue. So that's about a utility that's 3 or 4 times our size normally. So a couple of few points of pride and accomplishments for Silicon Valley Power, which of course provide key benefits to our customers, is that we've maintained the lowest average power rate, system power rate in the state of California. We have very high reliability. And you know those two factors were driven through strategic planning and communicating with our customers. The who's who of the high-tech industry is very keen on both of those items. And then, of course, we are also fairly high in renewable power. We're actually up to almost 50% if you count large hydro. I'm really happy to be participating with Ron this morning. We've got quite a few synergies in our conversations, and I look forward to the conversation. Ron?
Okay, very good. So if we can go to the next slide. So let's begin by talking about what is a smart city. And if you go out and you look on the internet or you read the various materials that are out there, which are quite extensive, I would say if you're curious about how popular smart city is, go into Google and type in smart city, and you'll be impressed with the number of hits that you'll get. But the one thing you'll find is that there are a lot of different views of what a smart city actually is, or what a smart community actually is in the future, where it's going, etc. So what Larry and I have done is we've tried to sort of drill down to some consensus-type characteristics of a smart city. When there's so much material about where the future is headed in this area, one of the key things you have to do is to find some practical approaches and to be able to lay out sort of a plan. So four characteristics that I would consider more technology enabled or technology focused type characteristics of smart city, and I do believe technology is going to be one of those key enablers or key things that can be leveraged to actually bring these smart cities of the future to reality. But four characteristics are that smart cities of the future are going to be more efficient, and that's with regard to energy and many other areas as well. They're definitely going to be more modern, and again, that's that technology aspect coming into the smart cities of the future, which forms sort of a bedrock or an infrastructure, particularly ICT infrastructures, communications and information technologies. They're definitely going to be more automated. We're already seeing lots of examples of that start to occur, and I would say that's in the very early stages. Automation being, again, a key way to reach more efficiency, which is going to be necessary to face some of the challenges we face. And there's going to be a very strong focus that's going to even continue to grow on security. And it's not only security in the context of information and so forth, but it's more pervasive than that. It's even security that's enabled for community security, et cetera. So those are four technology type aspects. Larry, you want to comment on some of the other comments we have here?
Yeah, just to show the complementary nature of Ron and my thinking is that those technology indicators are complemented on the customer side by a smart city that is more connected, a population that is more informed, and utility that is responsive to those ideas.
And if you look at where is this leading to, and so there are many, many schools of thought about where the smart city technology, where the smart city infrastructures of the future are leading to, and certainly having a vision of what the enablement of smart cities will accomplish is critical as you start to lay out a vision of where you're going with the smart city. If you're involved in creating the vision for that smart city, having those goals of what might be critical considerations for the future as the smart cities evolve. And if you look at three that seem to be very common across most visions that are being created, and three also that I would say are gaining a lot of credibility with the stakeholders of the smart cities, particularly the communities, three of those to focus on are to create a sustainable economy. And I encourage you to think about all the different aspects of what that might mean, what a sustainable economy is, for cities to be able to continue to operate, to thrive, to grow, what is entailed in that, to create a better quality of life. And when you think of better quality of life, I encourage you to think as well, not just about the technical aspects or the physical aspects of smart vehicles or portable devices with better communications, but even to think about the more aesthetic components of that, how the physical infrastructure of the city might be laid out in a way to create a perception and a visual view of a better quality of life. And then a third area is to focus on how to create more intelligent management of all of the natural resources that are leveraged. Couple of times, but one of the key things to consider as you create the vision of the smart city of the future is to consider how to get buy-in from all stakeholders. because really to enable accomplishment of these objectives, you need a commitment of all of the key stakeholders in the community and all of the citizens of the community.
Yeah, completely. Well said, Ron. And the graphic that we've included shows a continuum of 6 of these key community factors that are all interrelated, that all require support as we move forward, and will each have their own signposts and directions as smart cities evolve. And can I go to the next slide, PJ? So the interesting hookup between Ron and I is that we both came to the table at this last year with our visions. Silicon Valley Power started with what we call the smart meter cubed, and that's where we saw smart metering leading to smart grid, and hypothesized that that this technology that enabled both of these could also lead to smart city. And Ron?
Yep, and one of the representations that we've had is the view on the right here, which you can see how that kind of aligns with Silicon Valley Power's vision of what the smart city might entail, from a smart metering, smart grid, leading to smart city. And I would comment that smart metering is only one starting point that a city might have. As Kathleen mentioned early on here, energy is a natural starting point for where you start to look at smart cities of the future. For the power basically to enable the realization of these smart cities comes from the energy side of things. Also, the infrastructure that's put in for energy management systems and metering systems, and having those pervasive eyes and ears that are brought by smart metering of all types, not just revenue metering, but all types of metering, is a key enabler to really help build out that infrastructure. So smart metering does tend to be, I would say, in my conversations with utilities and other industry stakeholders, I would say roughly 50% are looking at beginning from a smart metering type of an infrastructure. You might be looking at other types of city infrastructures as a starting point. For example, communication networks for smart lighting might be your starting point, but at some point these communication infrastructures are tending to start to overlap, which would typically include metering. But if you look, so let's say you start from metering as your starting point. You may have others, but there will be a common goal of leading to a smarter grid, which again builds out that energy infrastructure, which would then lead into a smarter city. And there's a concept that I've been discussing around the industry that I think is gaining a lot more credence, and I encourage you to really start to think about a more holistic viewpoint of smart city, and to start to embrace the concept of a smart community. And community may extend beyond just a smart city context because of the fact that cities may abut to one another. There may be, from an infrastructure perspective, you may have less clear lines of delineation. You have to start thinking of a more holistic way as these smart cities come together. The other thing is community. I encourage you to start to think of community, or to use that as a mental context for a broader, more holistic viewpoint of including all of the stakeholders and the personal side. Place it outside of smart city, but I encourage you to think in the context of community as well as smart city. But the key is metering infrastructure is a good place to start, and regardless of where you start, we all have a common goal.
So I'd chime in on this part, Ron, is that later in the presentation we'll talk about some of the efforts that Silicon Valley Power and Santa Clara have done, starting with smart metering and then realizing, being a department of the city, our city realizing that this network of communications and the efforts to be connected at all areas of the city would bring them great technology, a step up in their technology. And I think that the idea of a smart community is no better borne out than here in Silicon Valley. We have 105 cities that circle the San Francisco Bay Area, and really you're driving along a highway and you cannot tell where one city stops and one city starts. And so you start to see that our cities are interrelated into communities, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the technology, how that overlaps into the area as well.
Okay, PJ, next slide. So one of the visual representations that we've used in Elster quite a bit that we feel is quite effective in terms of creating this holistic viewpoint, which is so critical for smart grid and smart city and smart community, is to start to think about a 360-degree stakeholder approach where you not only look at consumers, but you think about how to approach community leaders, you think about the utility executives, and the decision makers that have to find out how to fund these initiatives, because funding of smart city is something that requires, again, a very holistic viewpoint, and it's going to be expensive to implement all of these technologies. So we have to focus on how to build appropriate business cases, find the value, et cetera, and then to look at those that are actually implementing the technology. For example, utility engineers. Certainly there are others outside of just the utility. But to take a holistic viewpoint with all stakeholders involved and to focus in on the benefits associated with this. And I will comment that all of the comments you see here around the periphery, this is just a subset, and this is a utility sort of focus subset, but these list of particular considerations can be expanded as you even expand with more constituents in the wheel here.
I think it's important to reinforce that these are just the utility lists. As you move into smart city and smart community, these lists get, I think, daunting. And the pace that items move around this circle can be dizzying at times. But I think that the important point for me, from somebody who works with customers and develops programs at the utility level, is that we see this circle has been coming to life for us, which is it starts with consumer-based engagement with the utility to try to meet societal needs and drivers, the things that our customers want in order to fulfill their goals and initiatives. But also invariably when we go out to research the market, customers, and we ask customers and our citizens who should take charge of climate change and who should, for instance, climate change, who should take the reins on that, they inevitably point toward
bit overwhelming. And one thing that's necessary is you have to pick starting points. You have to sort of step back, get a high-level view. So if you look from a technology perspective, one view that we have at Elster is that as we look at smart cities, we think of those as intelligent, energy-efficient communities is how it tends to boil down. And they're going to be enabled by what I would refer to as advanced architectural solutions. And a key word in that is architectural solutions. You have to definitely take a higher level solution-based focus with a strong consideration up front of what is the value brought about by these architectural solutions. And you have to figure out which type of architectural solution would be the best starting point for your particular situation or for the particular city based on existing technology that may be in place, how I can leverage that and how I can build upon that to implement these technological solutions. And if you look at what comprises these technological solutions in a simplified way, there are definitely going to be pervasive sensors, and again, I like to use the word eyes and ears of this community of the future. So sensing devices are going to become much, much more pervasive. That results in lots and lots of data, of course, which brings its own challenges. But you're going to have more pervasive sensors, and you need to plan for that up front. Be thinking about the pervasiveness of sensing devices and metering devices for metering energy and metering all other sorts of things. Communication technologies, this is an area that if you look at the press out there on smart cities, it's all about ICT. To start thinking about how do I deal with large amounts of data. But the key thing is going to be to take those applications that can enable these solutions to be able to extract real value from all of this data.
Yeah, Elster and Silicon Valley Power are in good company with this technology vision, and you Ron talked about some of the maybe the starting point for cities could be the streetlights and smart streetlights to begin to understand the world of sensors, remote sensors, and controls out in the field in the communication networks that are there. We see those kinds of technology and even societal challenges in all these different areas presented here. We see all of these items coming up in conversations about, at the city level, in conversations about climate action plans and how cities can support the technology and
this slide and point out that again, as you look at the whole smart city evolution, you really need to be thinking about how do I put some context around the complexity that is introduced by all of the different types of technologies that are going to be playing into the smart city of the future. If you have to put that structure in order to be able to isolate out what is my best technology starting point. As I've talked to different utilities, as I've talked to different C&I accounts and so forth around the country, and even in other countries, sometimes people start to focus in on one particular technology first, and they don't step back and think about it from a higher level viewpoint, and then start to plan from that higher level viewpoint initially, and then make technology choices based on that. So as you start to look at the higher level planning, focused again around the solutions that can enable maximum value and gathering that value early on in the process through small technology implementations, et cetera, so you can start to get initial payback and to basically create a plan that incrementally adopts the new technology. As you start to look at all the technology, one thing that's helpful is to think about it in terms of groupings. So what we've done is we've sort of laid out 4 broad groupings that if you look at most of the literature out there on smart cities and the evolving thought processes around it, most of the technology that is most applicable in the next 5-year period tends to fall in these 4 technology groupings. And you will want to try to address some aspect of each of these technology groupings, but then you'll prioritize which of these groupings you would start with first. A key starting point that almost everyone I speak with, and again this plays to what Kathleen introduced early on, is energy is a natural starting point, because energy is going to power the grid of the future. And we as an industry do have some quite unique energy-related challenges. We have, for example, the utilities that are providing in the United States, and even other regions in other countries, the energy infrastructure for the future are faced with aging workforce. This is common across the industry. We're faced with aging infrastructure. We're faced with a lack of comprehensive and pervasive communications infrastructure necessary to fully enable the future. So energy does form a natural starting point for many cases. But at the same time, as you think about energy infrastructure, be thinking about transportation infrastructure as well, particularly as cities grow. If you haven't done so, I encourage you to go out and look at some of the trends associated with migration into urban areas across the planet. And there is a migration that way. That creates unique transport challenges of the future. And as we put these infrastructures in, as we create the energy mechanisms to enable better energy management and energy delivery, how does that impact transport? Be thinking about e-health. Health is another considerable technology realm, and be thinking about how energy touches health and how common networks can be used for both energy-related purposes and health purposes, because the communication network and I encourage you to think in terms of security more broadly than just data security, but be thinking in terms of personal security, be thinking in terms of holistic approaches to how you implement security and how all these different technology groupings come together under security. So those are 4 large technology groups. Larry, any further comments on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When Ron showed me this diagram and we worked on this slide, I got totally excited. I mean, my daughter, quoting my daughter, this was an oh my God moment for us, and it reinforced a lot of ideas that we have had here in a very displayed in this diagram in a very conceptual basis, and I can't wait to get into that part a little bit later in the presentation about what we exercise to pursue that unified network layer in the middle.
Next slide. So as I've talked around the country about communications, and again, communications and ICT in general is one of the critical underlying bedrock technologies that's going to need to be implemented to enable the energy grid of the future, the smart cities of the future, and the smart communities of the future. And I've tried to look at what the evolution of technology related to communications is. And again, one thing we've tried to do in this particular presentation is to sort of simplify and to create some context that you can take away and consider and can use to help you better approach smart cities, which is, again, a very complex topic. If you look at the evolution of communications that play into the smart grid, and I would even say other areas as well, there are certain aspects you need to be considering. And these are aspects that we're seeing evolve very rapidly across the industry. One of those is the concept of interoperability. And I would even say multidimensional interoperability, meaning that it's not just between one communication network to another, but you have to think about it. It might be device to device. It might be vertically oriented from certain types of networks to networks. And it might be even at the application layer of the network management systems, for example. So be thinking in terms of interoperability from a multidimensional perspective. Another thing is you're going to have multi-layered architectures. For example, if you look at the smart grid solutions that have been rolled out for metering infrastructure, most of those today include multiple layers. And for example, if you look at mesh, which tends to be one of the dominant technologies in use in North America, or if you look at PLC, that tends to be a dominant network technology in Europe, you'll also find that in many cases there's a layer above the mesh, which would be the field area network or the neighborhood area network, where you have a sort of a wide area network. So you have multiple layers, and this multiple layered architecture is going to be a reality of the future. So think about not only the interoperability from a horizontal layer, but since you do have multi-layered architectures, from a vertical layer as well. The other aspect that's widely being recognized is that multi-purpose networks. In a smart city, perhaps nowhere is this better demonstrated than a smart city. So no longer are you deploying a network just for metering infrastructure, but you're also deploying a network that can be used for health, for security implementations, public safety, video monitoring, for example, et cetera. And so as you have these multi-purpose networks, you're going to have networks that are special purpose built, and you're going to have networks that are multi-purpose built, and you have to be thinking about, as you do your high-level planning, what are all the different purposes that the various networks may need to implement. Types of networks and other purposes for other types of networks, and then to consider how do these interoperate. And then finally, as you deploy devices, these devices, whereas historically devices begin with a single radio chip in them typically, now they have many, many different types of network communication devices within the specific devices. Think of the cell phone as an example. Early on, cell phones didn't have Bluetooth. Now they have Bluetooth. They have Wi-Fi. They have cellular, all in one device. Interestingly, think of the parallels of smart meters to cell phones, exactly the same type of evolution. And I would say that's going to be happening across all different types of devices in the smart grids of the future. Or do you see cars? Think of cars, automobiles, as one of the smart devices of the future. They're mobile, they have multiple networks, and they will be talking to other networks, including networks, for example, that have metering. And so if you look at characteristics of these networks of the future, they're going to be more secure. There's going to be a continuing focus on security, and again, take a holistic viewpoint of that. There's going to be a much greater drive towards privacy of data, and that brings its own unique challenges. And privacy and security are not the same thing in this context. They're going to have to be scalable because as more and more pervasive devices jump onto these multiple purpose networks, scalability is going to be a critical consideration. And you have to think in terms of scalability, in terms of how is the infrastructure going to build out, how are these communication networks going to build out in the future. And then you're going to see greater and greater bandwidth with less latency. And understand as well a critical distinction. Greater bandwidth does not necessarily lead to less latency. You have to take a solution-based approach to consider latency, because latency is end-to-end implementation and how things are implemented from an end-to-end perspective all the way from the device to where the data is handed off to the back office applications. Larry?
And then in the utility context, I think that is more simplified than the smart community, but you can see that there's a microcosm of this multi-dimensional interoperability happening with the utility industry, with my utility right now, where the devices and the applications connect through communication network, the ubiquitous multi-purpose communication networks. And that was the vision that we saw fairly early on when we started thinking about our smart metering deployment and how we were going to control the utility of the future. So let's go to the next slide, please, PJ. So we started a program just really forced out of improving our reliability to build a fiber network throughout the city of Santa Clara. You can see that in the map on the left, which is the red is underground and the dotted blue is overhead. And this is actually an older map that our security people allowed me to use. We really actually have over 64 miles of cable running through our city, and our city is 20 square miles, and it grows every day. But our dream really was the picture on the right, which is it's expensive to build fiber everywhere. How do we connect up with the Internet of Utility things of the future and support the smart utility, the smart grid, with the expense being so high connecting fiber? We came up with this dream of this outdoor wireless WAN cloud. And I want you to remember this image because I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that we had. But imagine having a cloud of connectivity over your entire territory so that whatever application came up next, the sunk cost of the communication system no longer had to be in that calculation. And you can, from thinking about that, more and more applications become possible and become cost efficient. So in some ways, the fiber is the arteries where you have incredible bandwidth flow and security, and then the Wi-Fi system or the wireless cloud becomes the capillaries. Next slide, PJ. So the challenges, of course, many people ask us why we chose Wi-Fi. And believe me, we were stuck with this back in with this decision. It was a hard decision because we were watching all kinds of communication technologies come and go, and it was very difficult. And one of our criteria really was that we kind of thought tongue-in-cheek is that we want to be able to order devices out of a catalog. So that took us into the public standard space. It wasn't until the American home appliance manufacturers in 2010 chose Wi-Fi as their when we were designing our outdoor system, we were thinking about utility uses, laptops, mobile workforce, and things like that. And so we designed a system with kind of a no-regrets density of about 40 radios per square mile. But what happened in actuality is as time marched on, the laptop became less and less used and smartphones became more and more used. So invariably, the complaints that we get from our customers come from our staff and customers is that our smartphones don't connect very well. And I think it's best described is that the radios on our lampposts that support the Wi-Fi mesh system are screaming out their signal, but battery-operated devices like smartphones are whispering back, and they just cannot hold the conversation. Now, I think that we went with this extension of this outdoor Wi-Fi cloud with the interest of backhauling or creating this last mile, last foot connectivity to the meter mesh system in the field. But when we started to think about, when we started to see others deploy narrowband solutions or rent bandwidth from other communication providers, we started to see our list of possibilities that Ron alluded to earlier of the potential uses for the system. And as one of 16 departments of the city of Santa Clara, the electric department, it wasn't long before we were all talking about what each department could use the system for. So, and then you remember the slide, the halo slide of Wi-Fi everywhere. One of our biggest challenges has been interference. And can you imagine the amount of radio signals going on in the Silicon Valley? There is a huge noise floor to overcome. And virtually everyone new coming into this space is trying to punch through that noise floor for their signal to be heard. And so that's a big challenge on interference, maybe more so than a tree growing in the way or a building being put up. It's the interference that's ubiquitous. So that might not be a problem for others. But then also, even with leadership support, our staff, utility people that are used to electricity, providing electricity to service, really had a hard time understanding why we were now getting into the communication business. And so I think that challenge is still difficult at this point, but the more and more applications and the more and more things that we start to use on the system, including mobile workforce, people are starting to see how wonderful this is growing up to be. Next slide, please. And then our program, we call it the SVP Meter Connect Wi-Fi program. And originally, we built this system for utility uses, but there was also a provider in town providing municipal Wi-Fi, which is a free outdoor Wi-Fi connectivity to the public. We realized quickly through feedback from customers that we could not just turn that off. So when we made our plan to provide this ubiquitous Wi-Fi coverage for our own purposes, we also made it laws from the utility in the city, and I won't go over all of them, but there are so many applications out there waiting for this multi-layer unified network, and these are just some that we think about all the time, but there are clearly others. So next slide, please, and Ron, can you take this last?
So before we get to the Q&A section, as we start to wrap up, we wanted you to have some takeaways from this particular presentation, and so we spent quite a bit of time looking at best practices that we've been studying across the industry as we work with the different utilities and other industry stakeholders that we work with in Elster, and also Larry brought his utility viewpoint to the table. And if we sort of summarize an action plan or steps for success, as we'll call it, as you start to try to tackle planning for the smart grid of the future, we leave this behind with you. And the first step is going to be to establish a visionary team. And it's going to take more than just a single individual. It's going to take a cross-functional team, but a leadership team that can build a compelling vision of what the future will be, with a focus, again, on trying to extract value from this, and with the phased implementation so you can start to get a payback to help fund the investment that's going to be necessary to realize this. But establish that visionary team that can really chart out the path, and that can be the ones helping drive as you go down this journey. And it really is a journey. It's not a project. It is really and truly a journey. Another thing is to build and validate and start to do this up front, the business case. Start with the SWOT analysis. Where are we today? What are the specific opportunities you have? What are those low-hanging fruits that you can tackle? And you won't try to tackle everything at one time, but you need to analyze where you're at. Establish clear baselines and metrics. You have to be able to measure and show the payback in order to provide evidence of the value being extracted, and that evidence will be provided not only to those helping fund the investments, but also to the community in general. It's very important to continue getting that community buy-in as you start to roll out your programs for implementation of the smart grid of the future and the smart city of the future. And another critical step. Yep, go ahead.
Excuse me. So great. That's a great point, Ron, and that really brings me back to the first. Well, take steps to get to those signposts to tell you that you're going in the right direction, and the team can see that with you.
And then a critical component is to figure out how to pay for it. And I encourage you to get creative. If you look at the value that can come out of these implementation of these new technologies, the value extraction can be quite large, and it can span across all the different technology groups and all the different areas that you see represented in this wheel here, which this wheel was inspired by the works of Herb Cohen, C-O-H-E-N. If you've not read up on Herb Cohen, I encourage you to go out and read. He's got some interesting information out there. And then look at establishing a plan, act on that plan. Again, think pretty big, but start with small steps. Validate those assumptions, extract the value, and then continue to build upon that. So it's more of a journey of incremental implementations, extracting value as you go. Establish a very collaborative support structure, and it is critical that you get the right internal team members in the organizations that you're working with, and that you also look at those external partners you'll be dealing with, and to really find ways for a win-win scenario of all of the implementers of the technology and the programs that are implemented, but also consider the community as a partner in this as well. Evaluate all of the available technology options, looking at it from a holistic approach, and then pick those technologies that can best enable incremental and early on wins and early on value extraction, and then plan for evolution as you go. The technology, the pace of technology change, and I can say this with lots of confidence as a technology provider, the pace of change of technology is only going to accelerate, and it can be quite scary, but build those flexible infrastructures, be thinking long term, and again, find those incremental ways you can start out.
And I think your point about planning for evolution, I have to agree. This is not just a project. This is not even just a set of projects. This is really a journey, as Ron had pointed out. There are lots of signposts for somebody who's been implementing some of these technologies that only come visible once you're on the path. So to reinforce about thinking big, starting small, get on the path, read the signposts, and prepare for a journey.
Absolutely. And then, of course, find and share those best practices. This is too complex for any one organization to be able to truly realize the future efficiently as possible. It's going to require collaboration across all of us in the industry, all of the technology providers, all of the utilities, and the communities to collectively find the best practices, things that work best, and then openly share those as lessons learned, and so we can learn and then we can share and celebrate successes widely, not only across the industry, but it's important as well within your communities that you also share and celebrate those successes, and that will help lead to greater and greater community buy-in, which is going to be absolutely essential for realization of smart grids of the future. And with that, I think we conclude the discussion, and we've left about 10 minutes here for some Q&A discussion.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much. It was very informative, and I loved all your advice. It was very good. So to our audience, both of our speakers today will now serve as panelists to answer your questions. If you have a question for Ron or for Larry, feel free to type that into the question box on your screen, and I know we have quite a few already, so we're going to dive right in. So we got a couple of questions, Ron, on the slides. It was the one with Einstein. So they has the smart grid and the smart city and smart communities. And there were 2 or 3 questions about, should communities be underneath smart cities? Should smart city be over the communities? How do you distinguish between community and smart city?
So as I think I mentioned in my discussion on this topic, as I've talked to many different constituents across the industry, the concept of community does come up, and different people have different viewpoints. Some people think, well, community is a subset of city. Some say, well, city is a subset of community. And I say that both are correct, and I think it depends on your perception and your viewpoint at the time you say that. If you, the way I look at it, and the way that I'm seeing more and more people refer to it, is in community tends to convey, I think, a broader concept in the mind of many people than just city. So it would depend on if you're coming at it from a more personal perspective. Community might convey the more social aspects of the smart city of the future, which are critical considerations, more of a community feel. Some people look at it from an infrastructure perspective, where they say, well, a community might be a neighborhood community within a city. If you come at it from that perspective, then I agree, community is a subset of city. However, some people look at it and say, from an infrastructure or physical implementation perspective, that you have multiple cities, and I think Larry mentioned about this as a challenge he had faced. You have multiple cities that might actually abut to one another, and so as the cities make technology choices, area as a community would lead to perhaps city-to-city collaboration for implementation of certain technologies, and then working out business processes so they could share those technologies. So it really depends on the viewpoint and what you mean. But it is important for, depending on the particular situation or the particular city or community that you do kind of define what you mean by that.
Excellent. Larry, this next one is for you, and it's a little bit of a trick question, so I'm gonna throw it at you anyway. On slide 14, and you're talking about when you chose Wi-Fi.
Yep.
One of the audience members is asking, so if you were making that choice today between Wi-Fi and cellular or even some other network, would you still choose Wi-Fi?
Oh, I tell you, I angst over this question all the time. And I can tell you that because of the standard that Wi-Fi is and has become, I'm going to say that we did not make a mistake. So every communication technology is evolving. 3G, 2G is just being retired, 3G, 4G, LTE. I mean, I must confess that we had 26 WiMAX towers in our city, and we elected to go with Wi-Fi. Even though Wi-Fi had some shortcomings, we felt like it was a technology that was going to grow with society. It was in every handheld smart device that we saw, et cetera. So the answer is yes, but I think that every utility and every city has to take a look at where they're starting from. We started from Wi-Fi because we had some experience with Wi-Fi with a municipal Wi-Fi provider before us. But if that isn't it isn't a foundation for you, the field begins to be wider open. Tough decision, of course. And I want to reemphasize what Ron said about the infrastructure is what's first, the utility or the city, smart city is. Again, it depends on what the infrastructure, in my mind, it depends on what the infrastructure you have in place. Cities own streetlights. They might own other things, fiber connectivity between traffic signals for synchronization. The cities might be growing their own infrastructure, but clearly utilities have a huge infrastructure in place that they can leverage. And I think that really I'm seeing the flow more from utilities toward starting the network play, and also telecom providers as well, but starting that infrastructure play with cities in that direction.
Excellent. Okay, Ron, this next one is for you. Now, when I think of Elster, I always think of metering. So since you come from a metering perspective, what trends do you see in smart metering that would impact smart city planning?
So if I look at metering, there are the obvious ones in that meters are growing in terms of communication capabilities, et cetera. But one thing that I mentioned early on that I think is a critical consideration with regard to metering is that historically meters have been either viewed, if you're coming at it from maybe a utility perspective, you're thinking in terms of metering as the revenue meter on the side of the house or the side of the building for revenue for billing purposes, billing type purposes. If you're looking at it from a substation perspective or distribution perspective, you think of types of meters, maybe higher end meters used for substation asset management. And then there's another whole camp of metering that is more in the energy management side of things, where you think of sub-metering and energy management initiatives, et cetera, which historically have been heavily oriented into sort of this larger C&I, industrial, commercial. And since this is a space that Elster plays in both camps there, so to speak, of both the energy management and utility side, one of the trends I see is that when you think about smart city and smart community, is you're going to start to think, you have to think more holistically and more that meters are going to become more pervasive, and the capabilities of meters are growing. We have a Moore's Law effect that's starting to kick in, where utility-grade processors or industrial-grade processors, the costs are coming down, and we're able as metering providers to implement greater and greater capabilities, more flexibility, both in terms of processing power of the meters themselves and the communications. And this is enabling a convergence of what I'll say metering solution use cases. As an example, we're seeing now as smart city concepts start to come about where utilities are looking at how they can become involved in, for example, implementing energy management systems to start offering services in this smart city context to these buildings, because buildings are going to be more energy efficient, et cetera. So now utilities are having to change their business models to look at ways to offer new services. So the trends of metering, where meters are starting to be thought of in a more holistic, more pervasive perspective, without the clean delineation, perhaps, as have historically been in place, is opening up lots of new use cases, et cetera. So it's the evolution of metering technology, the expansion of the pervasiveness of meters in general, because, again, think of metering not from one particular use case, but think of it as eyes and ears to enable the measurement that's got to occur to realize the efficiencies of the smart grid of the future. So to summarize, it's the use case evolution enabled by technology advancements and cost declining in terms of being able to get more power for the same dollar in terms of communication and capability. So the use case evolution, it's in meter trends in terms of more and more communications within meters, more flexible types of communication, which enables, again, more creative use cases. And it's in general also business case evolution and how models of utilities might be evolving because of these changes that are happening in metering.
I would add that you only have to look as far as your smartphone to understand the explosion in sensor technology combined with some smart chips to provide you with the eyes and ears throughout the community and throughout the system.
Absolutely, and that is an excellent point to end on, because those are all the questions that we have time for today. Once again, many thanks to our speakers, to Ron and to Larry, and to our sponsor, Elster, and to our audience for tuning in. We had a lot. PJ, I'm going to turn it back to you for some final thoughts.